Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Find a living in fisheries. The UAS Fisheries Technology Program offers online study from anywhere in Alaska, plus labs and workshops in many Alaska towns.
I can breathe, I will breathe under the water.
Is most likely a chunk.
Find your living without leaving where you are. Fisheries Technology from UAS.
If you are a rural Alaskan resident with an interest in preserving subsistence hunting, trapping, and fishing for future generations, and maintaining an open forum for public expressions, opinions, and concerns regarding subsistence, consider applying for one of the Federal Subsistence Regional Advisory Councils by Friday, January 29, 2016. More info at 1-800-478-1456 or email subsistence@fws.gov.
The National Weather Service.
Good Thursday, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It's the 3rd of December, and as always, we encourage you to stay up to date on your local weather information by heading to weather.gov/Alaska or calling the Weather Info line at 800-472-0391. All during the day, you can find information on Facebook, Twitter, and on YouTube. Of course, around 4 o'clock in the afternoon on YouTube. Even on your cell phone in the bush, you can get a very short version of what you'll see here on Alaska Weather. It's about 2.5 minutes long and pretty easy on your cell phone plan. It's a good way to keep up to date on the latest happenings around the entire state and gives you a sneak peek of what the surface weather charts will look like here when we talk about them on Alaska Weather. So here's a look at what's going on tonight as we go into the warnings map, which I think I'm going to need a little more help with from the control room tonight. There we go. The hazardous weather chart shows the dense fog advisory that's in effect. This is something that's been kind of sitting over Juneau really for a large part of today, and the dense fog is expected to last at least until the mid to late morning hours tomorrow. And as a result of that, they could have some significant interruptions in marine and aviation areas there. So if you've got plans to go in and out of Juneau and visibility is a factor in the decision points that you got to make there, keep in mind there could be poor visibility all the way through tonight into tomorrow morning and maybe in through mid-morning after sunrise tomorrow. The solar heating there during the daytime just isn't enough to burn that off right now, and the ground's pretty moist and there's some cool and very still air over the region, and it looks like that will continue through tomorrow. Let's take a look at the next chart, and up across northwestern sections of the state and the Chukchi Seacoast, wind chill advisory is in effect there, looking for values that could drop to about 55 below for what it feels like on your skin. We haven't had a whole lot of that so far this season, but with a little bit of a breeze right now, it looks like some very cold air is in place, and all that combined is going to make it feel pretty cold and maybe dangerously so if you're outside for any length of time. So make sure you cover up, bundle up, let somebody know where you're going there. And again, 55 below, especially west and south of Icy Cape from about this evening all the way through about 5 o'clock on Friday. So pretty cold conditions there when you factor the temperature and the wind together. Here's how it looks on the satellite picture now. As we look out across the west and the southern Bering Sea, you can see a broad area of low pressure spiraling here. We'll put this into motion, and as that tracks to the north and east, you can see that it's slowly sliding eastward. This isn't a really fast weather maker here, but it has kind of loosened its grip on the western Aleutians. There's another system right behind that as well. And if we could see the entire hemisphere all at once, you'd see one storm across the Gulf, one storm sitting across the Bering, and one storm coming off of eastern Asia. Each one of these has a dip in the jet stream connected to it. We'll check that out in just a minute. Watch this loop one more time, and you can see more of an offshore flow coming through the YK Delta right now. A little bit of a hint from a northeasterly flow moving through the Bering Strait and wrapping into this. There is some convection across that area of low pressure and out ahead of that, and each one of these waves will generally be diving to the south of Alaska. Now here's a look at the rest of the state. Across southeast, we're still seeing that south and southeasterly flow working up through the Clarence Strait. And across central and southern parts of southeast, a little bit of drier weather is noted there. So you'll probably have some sunshine tomorrow in the Juneau area after that fog finally dissipates, and hopefully it does there. It'll kind of unmurk the situation just a little bit. Offshore, you can see some of the clouds building up there. We're watching another wave of moisture work in from east to southeast, and as a result of that, there could be some light snow across south central Alaska. For the interior, passing waves of clouds there. Again, most of these disturbances are moving from east to west across the interior, and only a few of those seem to have an opportunity to produce some passing snow showers. They're nothing too heavy there, but there are several of them moving across the state, out across the southern parts of the Alaska Peninsula and the eastern chain. You can see some of the remnant moisture there from the systems that are working well to the south. Now here's a look at the surface chart. Up north, we have areas of fog around Point Barrow and some pockets of light snow. We have that wave of low pressure sitting across the eastern Gulf. That's at around 975 millibars at its strongest point to about 989 millibars right across south central Alaska, and a few of those pockets of precipitation as well. Low pressure sitting across the Alaska Peninsula, a few areas of light rainfall there, and another wave of low pressure even further south of the central chain. Pretty busy map when you look at it like that, and there's another wave of cooler air trying to drop southward. All in all, though, it's all going to mash back up into kind of something that's still hovering around the systems there across the western Gulf and the northern Pacific. Here's a look at tonight, and you'll notice there's still some areas of light snow possible around the Copper River Basin as well as south central Alaska. There might be an inch or two of accumulation on some of the south central roads there, so maybe a slick start to the morning for a few of us. A little bit further north across the middle and upper Yukon, some areas of light snow there, but more than anything else, it'll be the blowing wind that probably catches your attention there, especially the further west you go toward the western Arctic coast, where there's an opportunity for that to feel, again, as cold as 55 below. Blowing and drifting snow may be an issue, but it should be the falling snow that's as much of an issue there. As we look out across the west and St. Lawrence Island, a few snow showers there across the north and central parts of the Bering. Some pockets of light snow could fall as far south as the central chain. Most of that will mix in a little bit with some raindrops across Bristol Bay and out toward Kodiak Island and Shelikof Strait. Some rain showers there across the western Gulf, and you can see this is all wrapping into that low pressure system well south of Alaska at 961 millibars. Two things to keep in mind. There is another wave of low pressure that's going to try and work its way up across the eastern Gulf and maybe affecting southeast by Saturday. Watch for that in just a minute. You can see the hints of it. Back up here, you can see a little bit of rain across the southern parts of southeast. They're already kind of hinting as that pattern change. Look out to the west. You can also see hints of another weather system trying to work up into the western Aleutians. All three of those big waves in the upper atmosphere, all trying to kind of work themselves into Alaska. And by the time you look at Saturday, there's that wave in the east working northward. That's going to bring rain and probably some milder weather into southeast and probably scrub away any hints of fog there as the wind picks up a little bit more. There's even a chance for rain and snow around Juneau as we start up the weekend. For south central, we see passing waves of clouds, some light snow around the Talkeetnas, and there'll be some snow showers across the south and western coast, but still pretty dry conditions for the interior. Some pockets of sunshine showing up from time to time. Still breezy across the western coast all the way into Kotzebue Sound. Low pressure just north of St. Paul at 987 millibars there. Should keep snow showers going. And it looks like relatively dry conditions across the Aleutians. Not any big focus for any steady precipitation. Most of that is just going to be to the south, where the storm track remains just out of reach of most of Alaska, keeping most of the state in kind of a cold and doldrum type position there in the weather pattern. Let's take a look at temperatures then today. 30s and 40s for most of southeast. Juneau saw temps closer to 40 degrees, 42 in Sitka, mid 40s for Ketchikan, Craig, Klawock, 36 and snowy in Hyder, mid 40s around the northern parts of Haida Gwaii. Prince William Sound had temps in the lower to mid 30s, 36 in Cordova, 32 in Homer, 32 in Seward, 28 in Homer there, 24 in Kenai. And Anchorage saw readings today only in the lower 20s. It was in the low 20s for Talkeetna as well. Randy Pass closer to 14. 8 in Fairbanks, 7 around Eagle, 9 below though in Northway with fog in the region. It was 4 below in Fort Yukon and as cold as 29 below for Anaktuvuk Pass today. Some big cold sitting up across the coastal plain today. Nothing out of the norm, but certainly pretty impressive numbers there when you compare it to the rest of the state. Anywhere from 15 to 30 below across the coastal plain. Barrow 8 below, this western coast again with that, and the wind could see some wind chills closer to 55 below. Kotzebue Sound was either side of 0 today. Shishmaref at 3, Kivalina almost 3 below, 10 above in Nome with 1 around Unalakleet, 10 below in Galena, and you can see that cold still just lurking there across the lower and middle Yukon. 1 above in Ammonok. It was 6 above in Bethel and southwestern Bristol Bay. Saw temps in the teens and 20s today. The further inland you went, of course, the colder it got. Lower 30s for the Pribilofs, but above freezing, and most temps around the Alaska Peninsula today were at or above freezing as well. Sandpoint hit 37, 38 around False Pass and Cold Bay, and 38 for Unalaska and Dutch Harbor, with temps in the lower to mid-30s for the central and western chain today, 34 in Kodiak. Overnight lows will stay at around 0 for Minnie in Fairbanks, but of course in some of the valleys it could be even colder there, so we could stretch that as low as 5 to 10 below. For the North Slope, looks like anywhere from 15 to 30 below. The western Arctic coast again feeling colder. 3 below around Nome, with Southwest looking at temps from about 5 below to 15 above as you get into the Bristol Bay region. 30 for St. Paul, mid-30s for the central and western chain. South Central looking at temps in the lower to mid-20s. Southeast at or above freezing for most areas. Yakutat near 32 with a high of 38 tomorrow. It'll be warmer the further south you go in southeast tomorrow as that rain starts to sneak in a little bit more from the south and southeast. Single-digit temps for many in the Copper River Basin. Fairbanks in the middle Tanana Valley could make it into the teens with only 2 above. And for Yukon, 4 below in Barrow. Nome looking at 5 above. Southwest in the teens and single digits around Bethel. Looks like 30s and 40s for the Alaska Peninsula. 36 in Kodiak, and again low 20s around South Central. On to flying weather, and you can see developing areas of MVFR around the southern parts of southeast and the Dixon entrance there. That will gradually expand and work northward as we get into Saturday. South Central will see occasional areas of MVFR. The same goes for the central and eastern interior, and mainly just offshore of the west coast MVFR conditions there, and for the Alaska Peninsula with IFR around the Bering Strait and along and north of St. Lawrence Island, and probably offshore of the western Arctic coast. Here's a look at your pass conditions. Things have improved a little bit over the last couple of days. Anaktuvik Pass and Adigan Pass are both expected to be VFR conditions there through most of the day. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass at this point look pretty good for your Friday. As we get into Rainy Pass, you'll see some occasional MVFR during the afternoon hours, especially on the northern side. Same goes for Windy Pass there. And Isabel Pass is expected to start at IFR conditions, but probably looking at some improvement as we go through your Friday. Mentasta Pass right now looks to be A-OK. VFR conditions are expected there through most of the day. Tanita Pass, though, will likely have a little bit of that residual cloud cover and lowered visibilities and ceilings as we go through the day, and might even get a little bit worse as we get into the afternoon. So watch for IFR to develop there. And to start in Portage Pass, looking for MVFR conditions throughout the day. Chilkoot and White Pass will probably see some improvements. Remember, we're also talking about a dense fog advisory around the Juneau area that could last until noon tomorrow, and that fog tonight will probably still be there through the nighttime and early morning hours tomorrow. Freezing levels show that the warmth that we've been seeing holding across the eastern part of the Gulf is really kind of diffuse now and spread out. The surface freezing line still lingering right around Juneau and over the Prince William Sound region, Cook Inlet, and west toward the Pribilofs, but that's about it. Most of the state is, of course, below freezing in the morning, and the colder air aloft is pretty much taking over the Gulf as well. So just north of the jet stream, everything is pretty cold. The icing potential singles out some areas around Eagle and northward above about 4,000 feet. There could be some isolated moderate in that area. The area is pretty dry in many locations, though. Above 3,000 feet to Nunivak Island and the Pribilofs, across to Kodiak Island and Shelikof Strait to above 4,000 feet. Again, watch for some isolated moderate in that area as we go through the daytime tomorrow. Here's a look at the jet stream, and again, this is the super highway of weather. Generally speaking, on the south side, we get much warmer weather than what we see on the north side of this line. This is kind of a drawing or a rendering of where the fastest moving winds are, and how that guides the surface weather is pretty amazing stuff. Each one of these dips and areas of low pressure helps to guide some of that cooler air in. So with the air circulating around in a clockwise fashion, I should say counterclockwise, we pull in that northerly wind on the western side, and you can see how that would easily open the door to the Arctic cold just spilling down over the Bering and into the central Aleutians and into the north and western Gulf. Right now, though, high pressure is parked off the western coast of North America, and with that, we get a little bit more of that interruption of moisture coming up across southeastern Alaska, and we get that very wet flow moving into the west coast. So some water that they certainly need, but not a very active storm pattern for most of the 49th state. Let's look at 9,000-foot winds, and you can see that northeasterly flow moving across the Chukchi Sea. North and easterly winds continue out in across the Bering. Winds are slowing down across the central Aleutians as that storm wave has dropped a little bit further south now. You still see a few stronger areas of winds just south of the central chain, but most of that has diminished. Out across the central and southern Gulf, winds are a little bit stronger from the east and southeast. We have light onshore winds around 10 to 15 for south central and southeastern Alaska. Most of the interior at this level looking at 5 to 10 knot winds. The same story at 3,000 feet across the interior. Light winds, but a little bit more of a different direction. An east and northeasterly flow there. South central looking at winds from 5 to 10 and more of a south and easterly flow across Kodiak Island. Look for light winds off the west coast, a little bit stronger north of the Bering Strait, up to 40 knots there. And southeast looking at winds from 15 to 30 out across the outer coast. The inner coast also looking at lighter winds as you look at this level. Turbulence in the major focus will be right around the Brooks Range. We expect to see some isolated moderate in that area. Most of that's going to be below 5,000 feet and around just south of Amonik and west of Newtok out toward Nunivak Island. There could be a little bit of chop there, but no major issues right now. There just aren't a whole lot of storms to really churn up the air. So probably looking at the Brooks Range for most issues there. There could also be some visibility problems from time to time if you're closer to the ground. That's a look at your aviation forecast. We'll be back with a look at the sea ice edge and, of course, the rest of your marine weather. Stay tuned.
Finding a planet in the daytime. Hey there, stargazers. I'm Dean Regas, astronomer from the Cincinnati Observatory.
And I'm James Albury, director of the Kika Silva Pla Planetarium in Gainesville, Florida. And we're here to help you find your way around the sky. Hey Dean, have you ever seen a planet in the middle of the day?
Almost every day, it's called the Earth.
Okay, and I hope you see that planet every day. So let me rephrase that. Have you seen a planet other than the Earth in the middle of the day?
When the sun's up?
That would be the definition of day.
I've seen Venus, Jupiter, and Saturn during the daytime through a telescope, but it wasn't easy. The sky is so bright that faint lights from the planets are tough to find.
Well, on December 7th, something will help in your midday search for a particular planet, and you should even be able to find it with the naked eye.
Awesome.
Okay, we have our skies set up for the morning of December 5th, about 5 a.m. Dean, stop yawning.
I'm awake.
And we have a waning crescent moon just above the eastern horizon.
Higher up in the sky, you'll see the bright, steady light of Jupiter, the largest planet in the solar system. And below the moon, you might be able to see Mars, although it's very faint and very far away from us right now.
Now, I know you see that really bright light close to the horizon, and that is the planet we want to focus on this week. It's the brightest planet, the hottest planet, can be the closest planet to Earth, and it starts with the letter V.
Now, before you answer, let's watch what happens when we move ahead one day to December 6th at 5 a.m. The moon seemed to hop past Mars and is closing in on our mystery planet. And here is the morning of December 7th.
Now, that's what I'm talking about. In case you haven't already guessed it, that is the planet Venus. Now, it's really easy to find Venus before the sun rises, but during the daytime, you can find Venus with the naked eye, and the moon can help.
It may surprise you to hear that the moon and Venus are visible during the daytime, but they are. The sun's light doesn't magically turn off the moon or Venus or the stars for that matter, but the sun puts so much more light into the daytime sky that they have a hard time competing for your attention.
The key to finding Venus in the daytime is knowing when the moon is close enough to Venus to act as a pointer. And on December 7th, the moon will appear really, really close to Venus.
At 7 a.m., the sun is about to rise and the sky is brightening up, but you should still be able to see the moon with Venus next to it as a little dot.
At 8 a.m., the sun is up and you'll need to look carefully, but Venus will be there. And at 9 a.m., it'll be just to the left of the moon.
Now, the tricky part will come later in the day, so we better fly up there. For this part, timing is important. So, note we're using Eastern Standard Time. Around noon EST, you may lose Venus because it'll be too close to the moon. With a telescope, we can watch something amazing happen.
Just before 12:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, the moon will slide in front of Venus and block it from view. This is called an occultation, and it's pretty rare. Imagine the two objects separated by millions of miles lining up perfectly. That's what we'll have on December 7th.
Venus will then pop out the other side of the moon around 1:45 p.m. EST. Your view will vary depending on where you live, but get ready for it because an occultation is a really cool thing to witness.
So there you have it. On December 7th, you'll have a wonderful chance to find a planet in the daytime.
Just look to the left of the crescent moon and you should be able to spot Venus even in broad daylight.
And see if you can witness the moon block Venus during the occultation. It's amazing what you'll see when you keep looking up.
It's a time-honored tradition, teaching the next generation how to fish and enjoy our rivers. But what are you teaching them? Rivers change constantly, producing new hazards such as snags, holes, and rocks. And tragedy can strike in an instant. Keep your family traditions alive. Wear a life jacket. Don't drink and boat. Know the river conditions and be watchful with children. That way there will always be another trip.
Make sure those kids have a little more clothes on in the wintertime too, especially on the northwest Arctic coast where winter weather advisory or wind chill advisory is posted for areas west of Icy Cape there, where it looks like you could see values down to 55 below. In the meantime, something to note around Point Barrow right now is many of these areas around the very northern part of the shore, especially just south and west of Barrow, though, do not have very good shore-fast ice. A lot of that ice is still unstable and thin. So if you're looking to head out on the ice, make super sure that you know what you're getting out on, as some of that ice is not quite ready to go in all places there across the northern coast there, especially just west and south of the coast of Barrow there in the town site. Looking north and west of the Bering Strait, you can still see some areas there that are not quite filled in. The white regions are coverage and concentrations of 80% or more. The blue shaded areas are less than that. And anything that's not colored in is not looking at a whole lot of ice just yet. You can see, though, that in the last several days, a lot of this has expanded in coverage and concentration around Norton Sound and around Kotzebue Sound, and probably won't be too much longer north of the Bering Strait where we see that filling in as well. Looking down south and east, no threat for ice, and light winds will continue there, but that's part of the dense fog problem around Juneau right now with, again, moist soil and light winds and clear sky. It's a perfect setup for fog, and it's been pretty dense through a large part of today, and you can expect that to continue as we head into tonight and again tomorrow. So if you've got interest in Juneau tomorrow or trying to get in and out of there, whether by boat or plane, you might expect some slowdowns or maybe even some cancellations tomorrow. Northerly winds as you head southward across the inner waterways there, with winds around the north and west through the Dixon Entrance and Clarence Strait, 15 knots there. Outer coast winds still fairly light, anywhere from 10 to 15 knots. About 7 to 9 foot seas are expected there, a little bit higher as you head south toward Craig and the Dixon Entrance. For Saturday, the winds are going to pick up. Remember, there's a new disturbance lifting northward that's going to bring some rain and start stirring up the winds. That's good for fog. That's a little more chop there if you're flying around. Look for 30 to 35 knots across the Lynn Canal. Higher gusts are expected. Some of those could reach upwards of 50 knots. Look for south and easterlies out across the outer coast, with seas coming up pretty sharply to 12 to even 17-foot seas there for Saturday. Winds will remain pretty light across south central, across Cook Inlet and the Shelikof Strait region, about 10 to 15, 2 to 3 foot seas on the inside, and that includes Prince William Sound as well. Light and variable winds outside of Resurrection Bay to the areas east of the Barrens, around 10 to 15 knots with a 5 to 6 foot sea. Winds also come up across the north and western Gulf, around 20 knots, 25 knots in fact, east of Kodiak Island, and 15 to 20 knots inside southern areas of Cook Inlet all the way into Shelikof Strait for Saturday. As you look at the Alaska Peninsula for Friday, north and easterlies inside of Bristol Bay, 4 foot seas are expected there, 11 to 12 foot seas across the Pacific coast from Chignik all the way out toward False Pass on a 25 knot wind. For Saturday, winds diminish in most areas, one exception there from Castle Cape to Chignik, with a 12-foot sea continuing and 3 to 5-foot seas across the Bering Sea coast, and inside of Bristol Bay, look for a northeasterly wind at around 15 knots. For Friday, north and northwesterlies across the central and eastern chain, 15 to 25 in most areas there, 6 to as high as 11-foot seas on the Bering Sea coast, 14 to 15-foot seas on the Pacific coast, and 10 to 11-foot seas from Kiska to Attu on winds at 20 to 25. Winds come up a little bit more in the west from the north and east as we get into Saturday there. 30-knot winds, around 10-foot seas are expected, and 15 to 25 there for areas along the Bering Sea coast for Saturday, 15 to 25 as well for the Pacific coast, but seas hold around 8 feet in most areas there for Saturday. For now, for the west coast, freezing spray is going to be an issue generally north of St. Lawrence Island. Keep an eye on that. Northeasterly winds all the way from 15 to 20 down the southwestern coast. 5-foot seas a little bit closer to Nunivak Island with 8-foot seas south of St. Lawrence Island, and 9-foot seas for St. Matthew and the Pribilofs on a 15 to 25-knot wind. As we get into Saturday, look for winds to shift a little bit more to the north and east around St. Lawrence Island, up to 25 knots and 15 to 20 there across some parts of the southern Bering Sea as we get through the beginning of the weekend. Light westerlies will continue just north of Kaktovik, and northeasterly winds will rule the roost for just about everywhere else. The strongest winds from Cape Lisburne to Point Hope and down toward Kivalina, 30 to 40 knots with 8-foot seas outside of Kotzebue Sound. Enough ice now just west of Cape Lisburne and Point Hope to take off that sea forecast for now. North and easterly winds will continue from Prudhoe Bay to Barrow all the way down toward Point Ley, about 15 to 25. The strongest winds south of Cape Lisburne and Kivalina there at 30 knots with 8-foot seas outside of Kotzebue Sound. Recapping tonight's weather includes that wind chill advisory for areas west and south of Point Ley. Values could drop as low as 55 below. That'll continue through the daytime tomorrow, so be extra careful. Looks like dense fog will continue for Juneau as well as we head through tonight and through the midday tomorrow. So hopefully conditions will improve and not impede the rest of your Friday or the beginning of your weekend. Look for areas of blowing and drifting snow across the Brooks Range. Could diminish visibility. In the meantime, pockets of light snow across South Central. That will diminish as we head into Saturday. Another wave of weather moves up across the eastern coast heading into the beginning of the weekend. Thanks for watching Alaska Weather.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
If subsistence hunting, trapping, and fishing are important to you, please consider applying for one of the open seats on your Federal Subsistence Regional Advisory Council. These seats will be filled by rural Alaskans who are knowledgeable about fish and wildlife subsistence in their region. Apply by Friday, January 29th, 2016. Information at 1-800-478-1456 or email subsistence@fws.gov.
Indie Alaska is a groundbreaking series that dives into the lives of people living in the last frontier. Each episode introduces you to colorful characters from around the state. Funding for Indie Alaska is provided in part by Alyeska Pipeline Service Company. Catch the latest episodes at alaskapublic.org.